Next week, I would like to start a series of talks that I'm going to call the Alternative Christian. And most of you probably are aware that you are you are practicing alternative Christianity, that you haven't necessarily given up your roots in the Christian belief system, but there's a lot that you don't necessarily embrace. But what I have come to in my life is I feel the need to define what I am from a spiritual perspective and what your minister is, what I'm up here talking about. And I think of Jesus, for example. I would put myself in the same category as him, not in the way of accomplishment, but I would consider him as one who was practicing alternative Judaism. He was not a Christian. A lot of people think Jesus was a Christian, but he was not a Christian. He was a diehard Jew. But he was practicing a level of Judaism that the Orthodox, the mainstream Jews of his day did not get at all and felt was a complete threat to what they represented. So he was practicing alternative Judaism, and we see that word used a lot today, and I think it's been hijacked by many movements. There's the alt-right, the alt-left, the alt this, that, the alt-that, the alternative this and that, and that's unfortunate, but we're going to not have any words that haven't been hijacked one of these days, so I think it's kind of a good framework, because I don't give up my Christian roots. I think that what Jesus represents is a very important aspect, and that we must make a distinction between what he taught and what has come through the teachings that are attributed to him and what the actual church has taught. As someone said, the religion about Jesus. There's quite a difference in the religion of Jesus and the religion about Jesus. So that's kind of what we'll be looking at. But I started making notes this morning, and the floodgates just kind of opened up. So I thought this would be a good series, The Alternative Christian. Okay, so today, finding strength in adversity. There's a scripture that I really love because it's so simple, and it is the way to deal with adversity. It's the way to get back to our center, but it comes from Isaiah. And he says, "In returning and rest you shall be saved. In quietness and trust shall be your strength. In quietness and in trust shall be your strength." And this is so much what we talk about. You know, when our life is in some kind of a turmoil, we have all of these spiritual principles which are good to learn. But this knowing, this action of coming into quietness and trust, this is our strength. When we lay down all fear, reaction, all of the energy we're pouring into appearances, negative appearances, and come to that center, recenter ourselves, we find that fountain of eternal life that is welling up within our being, and that is our anchor. That's the bedrock that we build our house of consciousness upon. And so we return to that. And it's so easy to forget it when we are confronted with a problem. We tend to turn to other people. And it's natural that we do. Part of my work is to help people get through times of uncertainty, to kind of get them back to that center of trust and center of power. Realizing that I don't have the power. It's not me that they need to follow. It is what I'm saying is get back to your center. So in moments of uncertainty, we naturally seek help from external sources. With this assurance, we rest a little better, and that's the value. We regain some of our optimism, and we turn our attention to more creative endeavors. That's the help of spiritual counseling or reading, an inspirational book or passage or something. it gives us that pause where we realize we've been pouring our energy into the problem. And we want to pull back, get off that stage, and rediscover our center of power, our center of strength. And so that's, it's a letting go. It's a letting go with the assurance that there's something that will grab us, something that will pick us up. And I think that's probably what we lose in our time of panic, is we forget there are these everlasting arms. There is this one presence and one power that holds us up, that is the very core of our being, that is there, and we can touch that, and we can know that assurance. I'm doing that at this as I speak. That center is there. It's always there. And whatever the problem is, whatever thing that we are confronting in our life, that center of power is there. It never abandons us. And it's so easy to get caught up in the appearance and to let our thought and emotion go down that road, and the what if scenarios of what if this happens, what if that happens, and all of the things involved. So we create a lot more of a problem than actually exists. So in our moments of uncertainty, we do turn to people, and that's okay to do that. But the people we turn to, we want them to not support our weakness, but to encourage us to tap into our strength. If we're involved in a support group, that's what we want to make sure we're supporting. We're supporting the strength of a person. One thing I really admire about Emma Curtis Hopkins as a teacher, she was known as the teacher of teachers. She was a teacher, instructor of the Fillmores, who co-founded Unity, and Emily Cady, and a number of different people who started movements later on. But she treated her students as if they were equal in understanding to herself, that they had that same divine life, that same divine center in them that she was talking about, that she had in herself. And that actually helped draw out of her students that power, that center of power that was there, rather than treat them as if they're sitting in a classroom and they have to get more information from her. Her attitude was, I'm drawing this out of you. You already have it. It's already there. And that's been my attitude as well with everyone I talk to, that I'm not giving something. I'm at best reminding you of what you already know, reminding you of who you know you are at the deepest level. And one of the journeys we have taken, like the prodigal son, we've gone out into a far country of an external identity, and we've gotten all wrapped up in that, and we have forgotten who we are, and so we are in the process of coming home or returning. We're not learning something new, we're remembering what we have forgotten. There's a big difference in that. As I've talked about the woman that lost the coin, that had the 10, lost one. She knew she had it, and so she cleaned her house out to find it. That's an attitude that we will all have if we know we have what we're looking for already. It's here. We already have it. And so that return, as Isaiah is talking about, is returning to that inner strength. The strength we seem to draw from others really comes from within. In quietness and trust, the flame of new strength is kindled. And that new strength is the fountain of eternal life Jesus was talking about, I think, when he was addressing the woman at the well. He said, the water you drink from this well, you'll thirst again. And that represents the intellectual understanding of the book knowledge, I learned this new idea, it's all exciting, and it'll change my life and this and that. But he says the water that I give is living water. It will well up into eternal life. And it's not that he, the man, was giving, it's what he represents and was talking about. I represent the soul, that's what he's saying. I represent the soul that's in you, not my soul, it's your soul. And if you get in touch with this living water, if you touch this place, if you come to this quiet center of your being, you will touch this and you will know that you're okay. And he's not saying, stop drinking water. The lesson he gave was not about water at all. He was always using symbols to get abstract ideas across. And I don't think he actually succeeded in this case, because the woman ran off and was amazed, told all of her friends about this guy that knew all of her history and all that. She kind of missed the point. But we as readers of that story don't have to miss it. We can get it. So the strength we seem to draw from others really comes from within. In quietness and trust, the flame of new strength is kindled. And that is the renewal, the white stone. Revelation talks about the white stone. I'll give you a white stone with your name on it. And that white stone is our spiritual essence, the soul, the Christ, whatever you want to call it, whatever name you want to give it. It's your spiritual dimension. And it is always renewing. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Don't just change your thinking. It's let this inner life reveal itself, because it is new. It is ever fresh. It is not historically grounded in your past. It's here today. It's new. It's like every day that we get up and look outside, it's a new day. Is it new to all of us? No, because we drag yesterday with us, and the day before, and the day before, and the year before, and the year before that. We drag so many things, or we have things that are all tied into that are coming up on our schedule. But every day is new, and if we can compartmentalize that, if we can keep ourselves not only in just this day, but in this moment, we find really our true source of power. And that's what we're after. That's what Isaiah is talking about. Our focus of attention, when we're consumed with the problem becomes the center of our universe. We weigh everything against it, including our ability to live a happy and productive life. Somebody said, whatever gets your attention gets you. And that's a pretty good way to put it, I think, because when you have a problem, your creativity goes right out the window. It actually doesn't. You become very creative, but it's all about a what if. What if this problem keeps going? What if it develops in this direction? And we run out these imaginary scenarios on all the things that can happen. So we really put our creative energy there, but that's not where we want it. When the problem is removed, we become focused on things we really enjoy, things that are interesting to us. Our life becomes interesting again. And that is what we want. When you have a problem, that becomes the center of your universe. And it's totally understandable. It just becomes we want to resolve it, get it behind us, and move on. That's exactly what I feel like I want to do every time I have something pop up, and those things never stop popping up, it seems. And that's the other side of the thing. That will never stop happening. We'll never get to a place where that stops happening. But we may remember faster that when something does come up, that if we pull ourselves back into this center, into this place of peace, that we will be able to, enter that problem, deal with that problem or that challenge, however you want to define it, from a more creative perspective, from one that is less fearful, from one that is more centered in the true power that we have. And that's an important place to be. When is your spiritual life going to get better? Are you waiting for your external life to get better? If you are, if we tie those two things together, we will never consider ourselves advancing spiritually, because we will, as again Revelation says, there will always be wars and rumors of wars. Jesus said the poor will be with you always. And whether we're talking about poverty or negative experiences of any kind, what if they're going to be with us always? Do we measure our success by the things that stop happening in our life? If we do, we'll never consider ourselves advancing at all. But for you to stop yourself, to disconnect yourself, your thinking from that from anchoring your progress, measuring your progress against whether or not there are things happening in your life, when you can stop doing that, you will have advanced by light years spiritually, because you have an understanding that you won't be so vulnerable. with the things that pop up in your life, and they will pop up. So whatever gets your attention gets you. That's just kind of a little catchy phrase. I'm not real big on catchy phrases because we tend to memorize those and forget the truth that's behind them. Nothing can sever your connection with the limitless source of energy and inspiration that will lift you from the tightest situations. Regardless of how far you stray from your center of power, you can return. And again, that's the prodigal son. That's the whole idea of this belief that we have sinned, we have lost something. You know, I've had a couple of conversations actually this week about the idea of being born in sin, because I talked about it last week. If you are born in sin, if you accept that as a truth, and the way it's defined, to be born in sin is to be born as the result of a sexual encounter with your parents, you know, that your parents had, that it's a carnal kind of thing. From a biblical point of view, that is represented by the Adam and Eve story, where Adam or Eve disobeyed. They both ultimately disobeyed the commandments of God and ate of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and were cast from the garden. So we're all descendants of them. So if we're born in sin. But it's also connected to this more of a sexual kind of thing, which is absolutely absurd. But so if you drop that idea, I'm not born in sin, there's no need for my soul to be saved because I'm okay. If you can make that kind of a leap, that to me is part of being an alternative Christian. Is I love what Jesus taught. I love what Jesus represents, but I do not believe I was born in sin, that he came to wipe that away. I don't think he believed that. He never seemed to talk about it, and I think you'd think that would be, top on his agenda if that was part of the message. But it was like somebody would come up and say, "Good teacher, what about this and that?" And he'd say, "Why do you call me good? There's only one that's good. That's God." He's saying, "Don't look at me. Don't look at me." They tried to make him king at one point, tried to make him, put him up on a pedestal, and he fled. Said he escaped them trying to do that. And it's not just he got away from them, but he escaped. He didn't want that. He didn't want to be glorified as we obviously glorify him today. I think he would just flip out if he saw how he's spoken of today. There's a huge difference in actual history and in theological interpretation. And what we have in mainstream Christianity is a theological interpretation. We have 4 Gospels that were presented to us by evangelists, not by historians, not by biographers, but by evangelists who had a message that they were trying to convey. They had an agenda. And I'm not saying this in a negative way. I'm saying this is a fact. They were not trying to convey the life of Jesus. They were trying to convey how they were using Jesus to portray their understanding of this thing called Christianity, which was not called Christianity for quite a while. Earlier followers of Jesus were called followers of the way. He said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life," and I think it comes out of that idea. But it probably didn't, because that comes from the Gospel of John, and John was not written until 100 years after, about 70, 80 years after Jesus' death. But there's a lot of complications involved. But if we try to find the man, Jesus, in the teaching, I believe we can. I believe we can find these gems of truth that he taught. And I have done a search on that, and I have found these very beautiful things that want myself to call myself a Christian. But I'm not a traditional Christian. I'm not a mainstream Christian. But I want the power and the teachings that Jesus represents. And I think he represented, and I do not think he would agree with what happened to his teachings. I do not think he would have agreed with that at all. Because if you look at what happened to the Christian church, it's exactly the same thing that he was battling with Judaism. It became so orthodox, people just show up and stop thinking. And you have a professional clergy that tells you how to think and tells you what to do. And tells you all of the 600 and some things you're supposed to do each day to keep yourself above water, above board, and happy with in God's good favor, good standing with God, and so forth. It just becomes something that I think Jesus would not recognize at all. But I'm speculating. But understand that I'm not speculating any more than the traditional Christian is speculating, mainstream Christian is speculating. Nobody knows who Jesus was. We don't have any letters from him. We don't have an understanding of who he was. We have an understanding of who Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John think he was, and Paul. But that's not Jesus. That's not who Jesus thought he was. So we can glean tidbits of things, of principles in his teachings. And I think it all ties into what you find throughout the Bible. There's universal truths. Emma Curtis Hopkins called this the live wire of truth that flows through all teachings of the world, the charmed books, as she calls them, charmed books of the world. There is truth, and that truth basically is there's one God, one energy, one presence that is omnipotent, one power, and that we are derived from that. We are expressions of that, and there is no separation between that source and us. That if we stray, it's a mental, emotional thing only. It's not a real thing. And we can come back to that. That's what Isaiah is saying. Come back to that center. Come back to that center of power. That's where you find your peace. That's where you find your salvation. I think that's what Jesus was talking about when he said, go into your inner closet and shut the door and pray to the Father who's in secret. I understand that. I totally understand that, because when I turn away from the world and I go within and I listen, not to those voices cracking off in my head, but to that inner pushing forth of life, of energy, of that pure creative life force, I know that's real, and I know that's what I am. And it wells up, and then I put this self-image on it, and I go through life, showing the world that instead of what's at the heart. But I get tied up in that self-image. That's where the problems are, so I come back out of that. I become still and let that impress my conscious mind until it changes how I'm behaving, how I'm seeing, how I'm thinking. Changes everything about me now. That's the transform your life, transform yourself by the renewal of your mind. It's not get a whole new set of ideas. It's touch that live wire of truth that's within you, that soul, that spiritual essence, Christ, whatever you want to call it. So the steps that we draw from this are very simple. Feel the rest of letting go of your frantic search for answers. You're involved in something now, and all of us are. I've got things going on in my life that I would like to change, or I'd like to see changed. You've got things going on that you would like to see changed, and you would maybe operate under the temptation of saying, God, would you please help me change these things, or show me how to change them? So let's get off that. Let's stop asking that question, because if you use your time of quiet to solve problems, you'll never get to the answer. And the true answer is touching that level in yourself where you know everything's okay. You find your center of power. That's all we want to do, is get to that place in ourself where our mind comes off of the issue, and we go to that center of power in ourselves, and we know everything's good, everything's fine. That's where we want to be. That's what we're trying to achieve. That's what we hope happens when our prayer is answered, is we get back to that. But the trouble is we don't do that. The problem solved, we go on about our life, doing something else. We haven't really accomplished that connection, that experience. And we want that. We need that. It's our ground. It's our bedrock. So feel the rest of letting go of your frantic search for answers. Be still and trust that the answers you need are now forthcoming. That's what Isaiah said, trust. You become still and don't so much ask, but asking is really a state of mind that I have received. Whatsoever you ask for in prayer, believe that you've received it and it's yours. So when you believe you've received it, you're immediately at peace. So that's what we want to achieve. We sit down to be still. We're letting go. How do you know when your prayer is answered? When you achieve a level of peace and trust. I trust that that which I need is coming forth, that the answer that I need is coming forth right now. And when I get to that point in my time of quiet, if I don't get to that point in my time of, if I can't still my mind, I'll get up and do something else and then come back. There's times we just can't sit down and be still. I don't know if you've ever had that problem. I have once in a while. You're just so into the problem, you can't let it go. And, maybe you want something to happen or whatever. You're just afraid or angry or whatever, and you can't stop the process. That's not the time to try to be still. If you can push past that, great. But if you can't, that's okay too. Get up and go do something else and come back when you're a little more relaxed. Maybe you go talk to somebody, or maybe you read something that settles you down a little bit. Then come back, because it's important to make that contact, to have that experience of actually touching the real. And you've done it because you experience peace. That's the answer you're seeking. So be still and trust that the answers you need are now forthcoming. It's a shift. It's a knowing. You sit down frantic and you shift into this something that you don't know how necessarily. You don't have to. But somehow things are working out. And I have almost continually had to come to that place. Life looks pretty precarious sometimes. So what is the spiritual thing about? Is it about stopping the precarious appearances? Or is it about finding peace right in the face of them? I am a spiritual being going through a material experience. We love that saying. Am I? Am I proving that in this situation? Am I truly latching on to that deeper reality enough to where I'm actually experiencing a shift in my inner self, where I'm at peace now? That's what we want. Let new strength and courage arise from the core of your being. That goes without saying. When you get up from your time, when you make that shift and you get up and go about your business, the temptation is going to come where you jump right back into the old self. So will you do that? Do you want to do that? How far do you carry this? Is this a practical thing, or is it just something that you do for exercise? I don't think so. We want to be able to carry it into our life. If you've got to resolve some issue, then get involved resolving that. It's not to say that just all goes away. Maybe you've got to pick up the phone, make some phone calls. Maybe you've got to do some business. Maybe you've got to talk to somebody about something that's not, showing up too good in your life, that needs changing. You have to confront something. It's not that we don't just evaporate from this planet or responsibility. We stay with that stuff, but we do it from a center of peace, that the place that Isaiah talked about, that point of power, point of rest, where we know that everything we're doing now from this point on is the right thing, and the chemistry is working. It's working out through everything we do. Okay, so next week, just to close this, I will say again, I'm going to start a series on the alternative Christian. And I think you're going to like this, and I would recommend you bring somebody that might be interested in this as well, because there are a lot of people out there who don't really want the traditional Christian message. They don't want the woo-woo junk that we get out here in this New Age stuff either. There is a way we can take a Christian grounding and we can carry it with us in a way that makes sense. And I don't care if the fundamentalist says if it's not all about Jesus, it's no good. They're going to say that. We already know that, so we don't worry about that. And I've been attacked by that kind of thing all my life anyway, so I'm pretty used to it. But I want to maintain my Christian roots in a way that I'm not ashamed of talking about. There's a whole movement in this country that's, trying to destroy Christianity, that wants to get rid of it. And I understand why that is, because there is so much attached to it that is so rigid, you can't even breathe in that. And I don't think that's what Jesus was talking about. So that's not me, it's not you, I'm sure. But I don't want to give up my Christian background. I have a real appreciation for what I came from, because it was a stepping stone to what I am now. So I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Okay, so I hope to see you next week, and again, bring somebody that you think might be interested in this. It's not going to be what Unity teaches. It's going to be the alternative Christian. There's a difference. Okay?